Amen. You can be seated. Let's give them another round of applause. That was awesome. I love that. I love that. Man, I don't know about you. There are like weeks where you worship because you're like, man, God is so good. There are weeks like this week for us where you're like, you just worship Him, and it's just, I don't know. It's like a whole nother level. Like just a whole nother level. When they're singing, when you've gone through the darkest of nights and you realize God is with you in the darkest of nights, it changes the worship. It really does. It changes it from something you're singing to something you're believing, and something that is like within you that's dying to just burst out. And man, I love it. If you have a Bible, 2 Kings chapter 13, 2 Kings 13. My name is Jason, if I haven't met you. I get to be the pastor here, and I'm just excited. We're going to talk today about the vision of Church in the Wild, and all that we're looking forward to doing this year. And we're going to talk about changing our mind on certain things and being willing as a church and also as individuals to say, okay, God, you brought us here, and now we realize what we need to switch to bring us here. And so we're going to talk about that. But have you ever had something where God gave you like an idea or a thought like in the moment where you needed it the most? Like I've had God give me thoughts and like, oh man, someday I'm going to really need that, so I'm going to hold on to that. And then sometimes God's given me a thought and I'm like, oh man, I could have used that a little while ago, God. Like that was, but this week, God gave like this thought, and it was when I needed it. I can't say too much about this, but we had some really like close friends from the time I was 12 lose a family member this week in just a tragic and very hurtful way. And so we were kind of like going through it. And we were like praying for, and our church is praying for them. They watch this every now and then, and we're close with them, and it was just like a tragedy. And I was like, God, like trying to figure things out. And then my wife has a couple of pinched nerves, so she was struggling physically, and then her mom fell and she broke her collarbone, and they think she also broke her shoulder. And so we were just kind of like in the middle of this like week. And then we had some other news that wasn't good, and it wasn't great, and like it was just all this stuff. And in the middle of that, God was showing me this passage in 2 Kings 13 about like just changing your mind about stuff, being willing to look at stuff and say, okay, God, I'm willing to change my mind on this. And I recommend this book. It's called Winning the War in Your Mind by Craig Rochelle. I read a quote out of it like on one of these mornings that I was just like looking for something, and God gave me that book. And truthfully, how many of you know God will give you something when you need it, not when you want it? Do you know that? Okay, all right, I'm not alone in that. Okay, I have been waiting for this book for weeks, and I was so annoyed. I was like, how hard is it to get me a book? Like Amazon can get it here in like 37 minutes. Like how hard is it? And God knew that I didn't need the book when I wanted the book. God knew I needed the book when I needed the book. And so I started reading it, and I was like, this is it. Like, this is what I needed for this week. And it was just crazy how this whole book was about, like, changing your mindset on stuff. Anyways, I posted something about it, and someone who, like, they proved the point by their comment about the thing, they started just going. And I was telling Logan this morning, I was like, I deleted 20 comments that I wrote back. Like, I just kept deleting them, like, nope, God, changing my mind, God, thank you. And I was like, thank you, God, for giving me because this person didn't know what I was even talking about. They didn't know what was going on. They just took it as their time to shine. And I was like, now some of y'all right now are like, oh, is this, like, we're going to look this up. And it was like, thank you, God, for giving the mind change that I needed. I was thinking about that, like, there's so much in life that revolves around how we view what happens. There's so much in life about how, if our mindset changes on stuff, if our mindset adjusts on stuff, then things change. So like you're watching this like Man, why is everyone at Church in the Wild so happy? Like, this guy's always laughing and telling these corny jokes. It's not because the monitor, if you're watching it online, it's not because your monitor needs adjusted. It might be your mindset needs adjusted, right? We're preaching already, and I haven't even started reading. Like, sometimes we just need to adjust our mindsets. And in this passage, there's a king named Joash who needs a mindset change. 2 Kings chapter 13, he needs a major mindset change. He needs to have a complete flip of the way he's viewing a problem. So look at it with me, would you? 2 Kings 13 verse 14. Now when Elisha had fallen sick with the illness of which he was about to die, Joash the king of Israel went down to him and wept before him, crying, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. And Elijah said to him, take a bow and arrows. So he took a bow and arrows. Then he said to the king of Israel, draw the bow. He drew it. And Elisha laid his hands on the king's hands. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. And he said, open the window eastward. We're going to talk about that. And he opened it. Then Elisha said, shoot. And he shot. He shot his shot. And he said, the Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Syria. For you shall fight the Syrians in Aphek until you have made an end of them. And he said, take the arrows. And he took them. And he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground with them. He struck 3 times and stopped. Then the man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck 5 or 6 times. Then you would have struck down Syria until you had made an end of it. But now you will strike down Syria only 3 times. So look again at verse 15. Because there's so many things in this passage that God was pulling out that I want us to look at. Verse 15 says, Elisha said to him, take a bow and arrows. So he took a bow and arrows. Then he said to the king of Israel, draw the bow, and he drew it. And Elisha laid his hands on the king's hands. So I'll give you a little short, because we got a lot to do today, summary of what's happening. Joash is the king of Israel. He has a earthly physical problem. His nation is under attack, right? They are being attacked by an enemy that is stronger than them. It has been attacking them for a long time. It has caused major problems for them. And in the middle of this national tragedy happening for this king, he finds out that the prophet is dying. So now he has 2 physical, earthly problems that are big, major problems. And he does what's right. He goes to the prophet, which is a good reminder for those of us who take and go to God last. Like after we've tried to fight all the battles, Joash does a really good thing by showing us, hey, go to the prophet, go to the man of God, go to God first. Don't pray after you've tried everything else. Pray before you try anything else, right? Like he's showing us the way, the solution is go to God with the problem. And then what Elisha does is he lays his hands on the hands of Joash, which is showing us that God is bringing a spiritual solution to an earthly problem. When Elisha places his hands on the hands of the king is going through an earthly problem, and Elisha is bringing the presence of God into the problem. Far too often in our life, we again try to go through these things without the presence of God on the problem. So often in my own life, personal problem after personal problem, I'm trying in my own way to figure out every earthly solution. And sometimes we need the presence of God in the problem. Sometimes the best thing we can do is get into the presence of God and just worship. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just, hey, God, I'm in your presence. I don't care if anyone around me thinks I sing bad. Poor Lance over here sitting beside me as I dance and cry at the same time. If it's possible for someone to dance and cry and worship, I just did it. And sometimes God is like, hey, bring the problem into the presence. How many times in our life do we fail to enter the problem into the presence of God? How many times do we try to solve it in every way possible, and then at the very last, well, you know what, we'll try Jesus. Let me just make it really practical. How many times do we try every person for advice on relationships before we finally ask God what his advice on the relationship is? How many times do we get advice from 17 other single friends who are single for a reason, by the way, and they give us dating advice, and then we finally are like, oh yeah, I should bring the presence of God into the problem. You and I are in the middle of a problem. I mean, I think they announced this week 50,000. We crossed 50,000 deaths since last year. That's more than in World War II. It's a problem. We're in a problem. Our mindset and how we view things and whether or not we bring the problem into the presence of God is everything about the problem. So Elisha places his hands on him, and we can get so wrapped up in all the mindsets and the voices and the people all around us that sometimes we forget to bring the problem into the presence of God. But then he told him to shoot his shot. He told him to shoot his shot. He was like, bro, open the window towards the east and shoot. Now, you and I read this, and so often we read this and we're like, okay, cool metaphor, big deal. But Joash knew what was going on. Look at verse 17. He says, and he said, open the windows eastward. So he opened it. Elisha said, shoot. And he shot. And he said, the Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Syria, for you shall fight the Syrians. Can you all help me? Can you say where they're going to fight? It's called Aphek. Can you do it? Can you say in Aphek? Right. Until you have made an end of them. Now you and I hear that, and we're like, okay, good. But Aphek is their Pearl Harbor. Aphek is their World Trade Center. Aphek is the greatest loss in the history of Israel. Aphek is where they lost the Ark of the Covenant to their enemies. So he's saying, hey, you're going to fight at the place where you got owned years ago. And everyone in Israel knows that you got owned. You're going to go fight where everyone knows that your nation lost earlier. And all these different things happened. The king died. The king's son died. You lost the Ark of the Covenant. All the bad happened. You're going to go fight there. Oh, and by the way, you know what else is interesting about Aphek? They don't own it. It's not theirs. The Syrians own Aphek at this point. So what God is saying to him is, you know what you need to do? You need to switch your mindset from just survive to attack. You need to switch your mindset from, we just got to do whatever it takes to survive, to we got to try to take conquered land. And we got to try to grow. And we got to take and go and attack and be a people who are no longer just trying to survive. This king comes to him with this mindset of like, tell me what to do. We're under attack. And he says, go invade. Go invade. Switch your mindset is what he's saying to him. Don't worry about surviving. Worry about thriving. How many times in our life right now do we have this mindset of I'll do whatever it takes to survive? And God is saying to people, it's time to thrive. It is time to attack. It is time to grow. It is time to look at things differently than we've been looking at them in the past. So for some, it might mean you've never followed us online. And so that might be that you might be needing to jump in and start watching online every week. For some, it might be you watch online every week and you don't feel safe coming to a church. So you might need to switch that mindset to, you know what, I'm going to start going to the physical presence of the church where there's the community. For others, it might be, you know what, I've made that shift and I've come and I'm here, but you might need to go to next steps. And in next steps, you can learn about Jesus. You can learn about baptism. You can learn about gifts. You can learn about our church. We now have 4 steps that take over 6 months. And at the end of them, you can lead a group or a team and be a part of the church and be a part of knowing everyone and all these different things. For some, that mindset might be, you know what, I was too afraid to go to next steps, and now I need to. For some, it might be, you know what, I've been to church, but I don't really have friends, so I need to switch my mindset and go to a group that I've never gone to before. I'm talking about right now, we need to make mental shifts from, you know what, I just need to get through, and we'll talk about this as a church in a minute, to I need to start doing more for God. For some, it might be, you know what, we go to a group. We're part of a team. We serve every week. There's people who came, you know, I made them put up this gigantic carpet this week, size of Texas in here. Like they might, you know, it might be like, you know what, hey, we're a part of a team, but now it's time to try to lead a team or lead a group. I don't know. But I know that God never has us stop growing as believers. The Bible says that his ways are higher than our ways, so much so that they're like the heavens above the earth. You know what I like about the heavens? The heavens are really open and they're really big. God's ways are really big, and we have a lot of closed minds. Sometimes our minds are entirely limited to 6x2. Our entire mindset is, I will listen to everyone right here tell me everything I need to know, and they will decide what I believe. And sometimes you need to sit the phone down and bring the presence of God into the problem. Amen. Like, you can only listen to the news so much. We can clap for that. Come on. Sometimes you need to shut the voices off, and you need to start listening to God. And sometimes you need to put down the presence that is limiting your mindset and start bringing the presence of God into the problem. Because God says, even the gates of hell shall not prevail against my church. And we're a part of the church. So we've got to switch the mindset. Then, I got to make sure I say all this right. Because, I'm like an emotional train wreck today. So, then, for years, Aphek had stood as a place of defeat and tragedy of all the mindsets of the people. But God said, this place will be yours. That loss will be a win if you change the way you view things. Change your mindset. Don't worry about them attacking you. Go attack them. Don't worry about surviving. You've survived this far. God's got you and held you this far. It might be time that you switch your mindset from I've never invited anybody to church ever before to, you know what, I'm going to start inviting friends. It might be time that, you know what, I was too afraid to do discipleship, but now I'm going to do discipleship. You know what, it might be time that, you know what, I didn't want to be a mentor, but now I'm going to mentor someone else. It might be time that, you know what, I wasn't going to ask her out, but now I am. It might be time. I'm telling you, it might be time to switch your mindset. But then look at verse 18. 2 Kings 13:18. He said, take the arrows. Now this part, if you grew up in church, this is like, you've heard this, you've read this. This part always made me mad at Elisha because I was like, why don't you explain it to the man? Because I've always thought that, like, hey, why are you yelling at him after you didn't tell him what to do? How many of you had a teacher like that? You grew up, like the teacher didn't tell you what to do and then they yelled at you for not doing it and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't know. But wait a minute, read this again. He said, verse 18, take the arrows, he took them, he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground with them. And it looks like Joash has switched his mind because he only told him to strike it once, and Joash did it 3 times. So in my mind, I'm reading this, I'm like, Joash, good job, good initiative, buddy. But the man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck 5 or 6 times, then you would have struck down Syria until you had made an end of it. But now you will strike down Syria only 3 times. Do you know what Elijah was trying to get him to do? He was trying to get him to completely switch his mindset from, I'm under attack and I have to survive, to, you know what, now we're going to conquer and we're going to grow. And he realized in the moment the king never switched his mindset. Joash never was able to grasp that he needed to go from we're under attack to we need to grow. He realized in the moment Joash was not getting what God was trying to get him to understand. And then I started thinking about why didn't he just tell him? And here's why. I can't speak for God, but I think that God needs us sometimes to take physical activity and show that we grasp what he's trying to say. There's a lot of great churches that will teach you a lot of really, 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 really deep knowledge, and then they never take that deep knowledge and apply it to anyone else ever. And so their church is full of people who know a lot about the Bible but have never witnessed to one person in their life. There's a lot of churches, all right, we'll say it this way. There's a lot of experts on COVID-19. There's a whole bunch of them on elections. There's more on racial tension. There's experts on on politics, there's experts on vaccines, there's experts on all of that. How much of that knowledge is being put into action? How many times have we shown God that I get it and I'm willing to change not only my mind, but also my actions? And Elisha realized in the moment, Joash still was thinking, how am I going to survive this problem? Not, how am I going to grow the kingdom that I need to grow? So as a church, we have to switch our mindsets on things. Vision is difficult. The hardest thing of any task is convincing yourself that you can do it. Right? Like the first time I ever walked into a CrossFit gym, I could barely walk up and down stairs because my knees hurt so bad. And Dan Ritzer told me, hey, you seem like you know what you're doing. Why don't you take 95 pounds, put it over your head, and then do 100 squats? And I was like, there's no physical way on earth that I can do this. And now I can work out because my mindset changed. The hardest part is convincing yourself that you can do it. We would rather continue things the way they were than change them up. Joash was so used to being under attack that he could not consider how to attack. So God was telling him, change your mindset. And he was saying, God, just give me what I need to get through the day. And God was telling him, I'm trying to get you what you need so you can take back the city that your forefathers lost years ago. And it cannot be a place of loss, but a place of victory. And over and over and over again. And Joash could not grasp it. So let's think about our church for a second. Our church was one of the very first churches in Columbus to announce that we were shutting down and going online only. And we took some heat for that. There was a whole lot of people who started preaching sermons about churches that had no faiths and they were shutting down and only doing online. And 2 weeks later, all those churches were shut down and online. Like, yeah, we just have vision with faith. And we went into a mindset, much like Joash had, of we need to survive this thing. We don't know what it is. We don't know anything about it. So we have to survive. So for 13 weeks, our church did online services, and I am convinced that Zoom calls are like straight from the pits of hell. I hate those things. I can't handle another Zoom call. I had one with a bunch of pastors on Monday, and I told them straight up, I'm like, listen, guys, I hate these things. Can we just not get coffee? Like, I'll sit 50 feet away and yell before I'll look at it. Like, I just can't do it. We did online services, and for like 5 of those weeks, our numbers just like went way up and our giving went way up. And then we started to realize, you know what, this survival mindset, we're not going to be able to survive the survival mindset if we keep doing this because everything started to go way back down. I started watching myself not want to watch myself preach anymore. I was like, I need worship. I need community. I need something more than this. So we had to change our mindset from we will just survive online to we will survive in person. So as a church, we figured out we will just do whatever it takes to survive opening back up and being open. We did 3 drive-in services. And it was Easter, so I thought I was real cool and didn't wear any socks with my shoes. But it was like 30 degrees, and I was freezing after every sermon. My feet were like blue. Man, it was crazy. We decided to reopen. So our mindset, again, was like, do whatever it takes to survive. So we opened the back doors. We all came in through the back. I don't know if y'all remember this. Someone got a terrible idea to put a tent up and put an air conditioner in it. Worst idea in the history of church. I don't know whose idea it was. I'm going to blame everybody else in this building besides me. It was a terrible idea. We were just doing whatever. There was kids running everywhere. Now, I grew up in a church where kids run, so I enjoy it. Honestly, the kids talk back more than the adults, so I like having the kids around. Like, that's my dad's church. Everyone sat in, so it was fun. I like that. But it wasn't helping our kids grow. We were doing things to survive. We were trying to just survive the summer. Do whatever it takes to make it through this. Then, they say like the hardest time for any church is the summer, but it's like almost certain death for a church plant in the summer. You drop to below 30% of your attendance every summer. So we're trying to survive that, and they say the second hardest time for a church plant is every time there's an election. So we had summer followed by an election where everyone had, all of a sudden people are like, I'm not coming if they're coming anymore because they're crazy. Like, we had all of this going on. And we genuinely as a church were like, we got to survive. We made it through elections, and then we changed our mindset to, okay, we survived. Now we got to try to adapt and see what we can do. But in all of this, like, we were trying things, like we were just doing whatever it took each week. Each week on Thursday, we were trying to figure out if we were meeting in person, in a drive-in, or if we were meeting online only. I'm not real great, but trying to figure out 3 services on Thursday is not the best idea. Like, well, we were just, again, like, do whatever it takes. We started to adapt. We bought some new cameras. We invested in our online thing. We started to figure out some different things. We changed our service up, and we started to adapt. And now God is saying to me and to our church, it is time to switch your mindset again, and it is time to figure out that you have survived, and it is time to go and grow. It is time to change your mindset from, we just got to make it, to, you've made it. Start going and conquering enemy territory again. Start going and sharing the gospel again. Start going and being the church in the wild. Be the church in the wild, who you say you are. Be that. So, 2021, we are going to move forward. We are going to shoot our shot. We are going to advance and grow, and we are going to change our mindset in a couple ways. Number one, we are going to do a missions trip to the city of Detroit. We have a church on 8 Mile in Detroit that feeds like 500 people every week in the middle of 8 Mile. And they've been doing this throughout a pandemic on their own with almost no help. And they were kind enough to come speak for us at one point. So we're going to return the favor. We are going to take the gospel to the city of Detroit. And we're going to do a mission trip. And we are going to impact and influence people, because Detroit might honestly be our AFAC, right? Like it might be. We're going to go there and we're going to share the gospel. We've been talking about other missions trips to other countries. We are going to do Wildlife Week again. I am not going to print another shirt that says the date, but we're going to do Wildlife Week again, because I don't know what's going to happen by the time it rolls around, but I know we're not going to make a shirt that says Wildlife Week 2020. I know that. But we're going to do Wildlife Week again. We are going to do a 6-week master class, my wife and I, in the summer on and specifically for and about marriage. This summer, because you know, the biggest problems in America have been domestic abuse, divorce, and depression. So we're going to do 6 weeks after services specifically about that. We are going to grow the training for our teams. We're not going to just sit by and say, okay, we just hope you show up and maybe you can help us. We're going to say, listen, if you want to be a part of our team, we're going to train you. We're going to show you how to grow as a human. We're going to equip you. We're going to do more training for our groups. We are going to activate the prayer team again. I am so excited for that. I cannot tell you how long I have waited for us to be able to pray together with people, and we're going to do it. And I don't care if we have to pray outside in the middle of the forest, we're going to pray together because God called us to pray together, so we're going to pray together. We're going to do communion again. And again, I don't care if we have to do communion in the woods, or I don't care if you all have to bring your own bread and your own juice, and some of you might mix a little extra something in that juice. I don't care. We're going to do communion because we need to do communion. God told us to do communion. We survived, and now it's time to change our mindset and grow. God commands us to do communion. We're going to figure it out, and we're going to do it. We are going to do leadership meetings again, where we teach and train how to grow and lead. We are greatly adapting our next steps. We've talked about it a little bit in the past, but our next steps is going from this vague, we believe in this, and we believe in this, to 6 months. And after you go through each step, you're going to get a different shirt so we know which step you've gone through. You're going to graduate from each step of next steps. So you're going to go from learning, hey, what we believe, to who we believe with, to number 3, why we believe it, and to step number 4, how to lead others in what we believe. We're going to do that because we're not here to just survive anymore. We're here to grow. We're going to do a church calendar with all of our events and everything on it, and we're not going to be ashamed to admit that we're going to do events because we're going to do them, and we're going to figure out the most safe way possible. But hear me on this, please. If it's safe to go to a restaurant, we follow more steps for safety than the restaurant. It's safe to go to a church activity. We do more to keep our kids safe than any preschool or school in the city of Westerville. So if it's safe to go to that, it's safe to come to this. We are going to do a pop-up service in the Short North. We have a person in the Short North, a friend who owns a hair salon. We baptized him a little while ago. And he said, hey, for my birthday, can you come and do a service? I got nothing but lost friends. Can you sing and preach and share the gospel with them? I'll invite him to my birthday party, and then you're going to drop a truth bomb on him. I'm like, all right, dude. We're going to do that. We are not going to be like Joash where we're afraid. You know what? I don't know. Listen, God has given us the spirit of fear, not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So we're going to take the power, we're going to love people, and we're going to do it safely, all at once, but we're going to do it. And then, what I'm excited about for this week is, if you know anything about our kids' church, we adopted this summer a survival mindset for kids' church. Literally, we will do whatever it takes to make it through the week. We spent our entire budget, everything we had for kids, on keeping them safe and separate from each other. And those things broke every week, and then we spent the budget again the next week. But we just did what we had to survive. My wife taught, and Brooke taught, I think for 14 weeks straight. They did what they had to do to survive so that people could come and grow. But God has been telling us it is time to more than just grow, to survive. It is time to grow. So we started praying about, God, what do you have for kids' church? My wife told me, she was like, listen, I love you. I don't love teaching kids' church, and I don't love teaching it 14 weeks in a row. I need someone to help. And I went and ate lunch with a friend who was like, hey, if you ever need a kids' church leader, I got a friend who wants to be a kids' church leader. And I was like, sitting there eating lunch, and I was like, dude, like literally we're praying and begging God for a kids' church leader. So we went and met Colleen. And it was like, I planned this service without her even saying yes. I don't know if she knows that. I planned this service at that point because I was like, this is the girl. This is it. She's going to lead kids' church. And I knew that, and I thought because she's done things differently than I have. I want people who think of things differently than I think of things. I want people who have done things differently than I've done things. I want different ideas and different mindsets because that's how we grow. So, Colleen is the most recent member of the team at Church of the Wild. She comes with a background in music, therapy, and kids ministry. She's passionate about watching kids and families grow in faith together. She was born and raised in good old Worthington, Ohio. She went to school at the University of Dayton. She spent 5 years working as a music therapist in psychiatric hospitals around Columbus before being called into kids ministry 4 years ago. Colleen lives in Gahanna with her husband, Adam, their daughter, Scarlett. They love to hike, camp, hammock, cook, and play music together whenever they can. And I was like begging God, like, God, please help us find someone. And then God brought this one lunch together, and God said, can you act in faith upon what I'm doing? Can you break the arrows? Can you do that? Can you not just let this moment pass you by, but instead act in faith? So as a church, we are acting in faith. We are welcoming Colleen and Adam and Scarlett. You guys can come up here today if you would. We are welcoming them. Scarlett's already my best friend. So I want us as a church, and hear me on this, we survived as a church because we survived as a family. We survived as a family. We said we're a family, so we're getting through this together as a family. But sometimes when you get through something together as a family, when someone wants to join the family, you say, you didn't go through that with us, so we're not going to be as welcoming to you. I want us to change that mindset. I want us to say, you are a part of the family. You are a part of the community. You are a part of the church. And we are welcoming you, and we are thankful for you because we believe that God is going to take our kids' church and grow it. I believe my replacement is in kids' church. I believe that. So we have to get the replacement ready to be able to do this because not everyone in the world can pastor a church plant in Westerville where church plants go to die. We've got to be able to do that, so we have to change our mindsets and switch from, you know what, we just want to survive. We just want our kids to make it through this week to we want our kids to be the leaders of our worship team someday. We want our kids to be the leaders of our hospitality team. We want our kids preaching and praying and growing and teaching and leading and growing deeper into the presence of God. That's my prayer. So I'm going to ask worship team, you guys can come up and get ready to sing. I'm going to ask Brian. Brian is our prayer team leader. We have a gift for Colleen right here. I'm going to ask Colleen to, I told her, this is okay, give the best pitch you can for kids' church because after the service, there's a meeting about kids' church. So I don't even care if you're here for the first time and you're like, hey, I want to get involved. She's going to encourage you to join kids' church today, right? So we're going to have a meeting after the service about kids' church. And then we're going to have Brian pray for them real quick because Scarlett's ready to bounce. And so we're going to have Brian pray for them. Colleen's going to talk about kids' church, and then we'll close in worship. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to share a little bit quickly about the vision for Kids Church because I just came from a church that's been around for upwards of 50 years. And so coming into a church plant, you know, I've got a lot of things to learn and I've got a lot of things that are new to me. So as much as you guys can help me along too, that would be wonderful. But I had this vision and I just want to share with you. And then if you want to be a part of it with me, I would just so appreciate it to be able to serve alongside you guys. So kids ministry, it's fun, it's crazy. It's so much more than just childcare. We know that, right? It's an opportunity to point kids to God and make a difference in their lives. We get to show kids how amazing God is. But most importantly, we get to reflect God's love, pray for them, and speak his truths to them. And kids need people in their lives who show up to hang out with them, to love them, and to like them too, right? And show them what it looks like to follow Jesus. And this is how we grow the church. This is how we grow the kingdom of God. It's not from the top down. It's from the bottom up with our kids. It's hard sometimes to know when you're winning in kids ministry, though. You know, is anything we're teaching actually sinking in? Are they getting it? Are they really growing in their faith? And so for me, I like to have that big win idea. How do we know that we're winning with kids? And so we win when a kid takes a step toward owning their faith. And that seems kind of a big idea, but we have 4 ways that we can kind of do that. And that is when we see them spending time with God, when we see them spending time with others in a loving way, when we see them using their gifts for the kingdom, and when we teach them how to share their story, right? And we want them to share their story about how Jesus worked in their life and what that means and how things have changed. So we count it as a win whenever a kid takes a step toward owning their faith by practicing 1 or maybe all 4 of these, we call them spiritual habits. So as a volunteer in this ministry, you are making a huge impact in the lives of kids in our ministry. But do you know who's making an even bigger impact? Their parents. Now I have a kid, and now I'm going to cry, and you're crying, and I can't. I believe that in every kid's life, this is true. The influence of a family is always greater than the influence of a church. Guys, we see them 1 hour a week. Their families are with them countless hours. No matter what, a kid's family, not their church, will always be the biggest influence. So it doesn't make sense for us to partner with the most, it makes sense for us to partner with the most influential, powerful people in a kid's life in order to influence their faith. So that's why our ministry is committed to serving, supporting, partnering with, and engaging the parents of the kids in the ministry, not just the kids. That's so important. I would love for you to be a part of this in whatever way that you are able. If you're passionate about kids and families, knowing Jesus better and being more confident in their faith, I want you on my team. I'd love to serve alongside you. In a generation that is so bombarded with technology and social media and the world telling them so many things that aren't true about them, let's make our church and our families the place where truth is found. So I can't wait to see what God does here, guys. I can't wait to be a part of it with you. And I'm just lucky and blessed to be here. So thank you for having me.